I know you played in the playoffs against the Chicago Bulls. I played in the playoffs a bunch as well. You watch it as a fan. You watch it as an analyst. It's different. It feels different. It looks different. What do you think is the difference? Because I have my own sort of thoughts on it. What do you think is the difference between regular season and playoff basketball?
I think for me, it's probably the fact that over the course of an 82-game regular season, you don't feel the urgency every night. When you get to the playoffs, I mean, as soon as you get to the arena, even before that, you're headed to the arena. Feeling that you have like the electricity in the air and the city, like what you're anticipating, how important the moment is, just everything feels so much more urgent than anything else. And you know for a fact that, you know, the adrenaline on the court and, you know, it's going to be more physical. Every possession's going to mean more. And I just think your senses are so heightened compared to a regular season game. That's kind of been my experience.
Do you think the play-in and the Heat and the Lakers would be the example of it this year is helpful, winning in the play-in in terms of getting yourself set for that?
Yeah, I think that what's happening is that more and more teams are realizing that, yeah, it's great if you can, you know, roll out 55 wins and get a top seed or a top 2 seed, but there's other ways, and it's really more about making the right decisions with your team at the right time in the year and making sure that guys are ready to go when you get to that point. When you get to like April 1, closing in on April 15, that's more important than having your foot on the gas, you know, for 5 or 6 months. And I think the mentality for a long time in this league was foot on the gas at all costs all the time. And I just don't think that you necessarily have to do that as much.
The notion of urgency, you're right. I think the natural reaction to that is, oh, well, guys don't play hard in the regular season. And I tend to disagree with that. The point about urgency to me is not the urgency going into a game, not the urgency in the first quarter of a game, not even the urgency in the fourth quarter. To me, it feels, Doc used to always talk about letting go of the rope. Don't let go of the rope. You're in a tug of war. Don't let go of the rope. To me, it's just human nature that in an 82-game regular season, in the moment, right, you just kind of let go of the rope. It just happens. And I'm not saying the entire team or even as a player, you're like, oh, I'm cool losing this game. It's not that.
Right.
It's like, can you break my spirit? Yeah. It's easier to do that, I think, in the regular season. I think about the Kings-Warriors series specifically. Like both those teams, not just the Warriors and their championship heart and all that, like both those teams refuse to allow themselves to let go of the rope. So the urgency piece, that kind of what it means to me. I think the preparation piece is certainly different. When you're preparing for one opponent over a 2-week stretch, that matters. Sometimes it's also why you have these wild adjustments in scores. Like you might have a Denver, for instance, game 1 against Minnesota gave up 80 points, right? They were prepared. Minnesota, they had a good game plan. Minnesota, they got punched in the mouth. Okay, we got to regroup. And then, of course, they scored well for, I think, 3 of the next 4 games. So preparation is the other one. The other thing I think about, because I think this is the biggest difference, is because of the preparation, that leads to exploitation. And it's easier to exploit strengths. It's easier to exploit weaknesses. It's easier to exploit matchups in the playoffs because you have that time to really prepare.
Completely agree. And that's also, I think, the reason why you see blowouts in the national championship game in football. You see blowouts in the Super Bowl sometimes, right? Because of what you just said. Both teams honing in on one thing. And so somebody's going to do that a little bit better. And they're going to be able to hone in on where we can attack or how we can prevent you from being at your best. There's no question. That's a great point about the preparation. Like it's the one time like you feel more prepared to play those games than at any point in the regular season because you just don't have time to do that. It's play a game on to the next opponent. And what are we talking about? We're talking about, you know, it's probably better now because you have so much more technology at your disposal to prepare for who you're about to play. We didn't have that as much when I played. So it was, you know, you're going to get a film session, you're going to get a walkthrough, you're kind of going to get a scouting report, and then you're going to play somebody. And then as soon as that's over, it's the next team. When you're talking about a playoffs, you know, and sometimes you see it coming even before the season ends. I mean, in some cases, you don't know till that Sunday night who your opponent is. And even then, you're going to have a good 72 hours before you play at least. Maybe you have more if you're locked into your seed. So now you might have a week And that's all those guys are doing. So you never feel quite as prepared in the regular season as you do walking out there the first time.
Yeah,
the playoffs.
The point about the end of the regular season is funny because I would be on teams certain years, to your point about you lock up your seed, the other team locks up. We know who we're going against that first round. You have time. You have a week. You start thinking about it. Maybe they start, drip feeding you some personnel stuff, drip feeding you some game stuff. But in cases where you don't know who you're going to play, the staff start working on the 3 different scenarios or the 4 different scenarios a week, 2 weeks in advance. I mean, that's how detail-oriented this shit is now. And I think that's a big part of it.